So if you just take one look at the state of the music industry today, it's pretty clear to see that Western music as a whole is more divided than it's ever been. And now that the entire internet is full of AI slop and pseudo music producers, and even before then human slop, it's pretty disheartening to see for those of us who actually care about setting and maintaining a high bar for craftsmanship in making music. And the kind of canyon or divide between what you might call intellectual music or more serious kind of what usually is classical music, and more pop music and music that is simply meant to entertain and essentially to cause ear pleasure is basically growing every year. And with that, tribal thinking and basically a debate between two sides. The first type of person that thinks that music theory is just a waste of time and that it's a bunch of random made-up rules by somebody who doesn't actually understand true musical intuition, and the other side that thinks that musical intuition is the only thing that matters, and by avoiding the use of rules, you can maintain the art pure. And if you think one or the other of these is correct, then you've probably already lost the plot along the way, like many of us, because one extreme or another cannot fully encapsulate the art of making music. So here's what I'm gonna ask you to do. I'm gonna ask you to reject either of these extremes and truly aspire to the middle ground, the perfect balance of a musician who has both. Because in reality, most musicians use both. Most musicians do tend to lean to one extreme or the other, but in reality, the better you can be at managing and completely integrating both aspects into your musicianship, the higher level of an artist you're going to be. And truly, that's how you actually unlock artistic freedom and the ability to create what you want to create. And with that, everyone's natural personality falls into one of these two camps. And unless you're literally perfect, then you do fall into one of these two camps. And I'm gonna explain what those are here in a second, because the first one is the person that I just described who is a theory nerd, if you want to call them that. They're the person who thinks that the rules are the be-all, end-all, and that everything that does not fit into traditional Western harmony and chord analysis or atonal analysis, if that's the type of music you're writing, is not legitimate music and is just a breach of what should be written. And here's the big problem with that. Even the primary counterpoint, harmony, and voice leading rules that we know today that we treat as our God in everything that we do when it comes to music theory were essentially largely around the 18th century with Bach. And if you look at what Bach was actually doing, he was actually a massive breacher of the pre-existing rules that came before him. And what he actually did was create an extreme clash and new dissonances that people really were not quick to accept. It was only after the fact that academics and scholars came to look at what he had done and seen that it was very mathematically perfect that it was actually accepted and taken on into our canon of music theory. And there was one reason and one reason only that he was ever able to do that. And that reason is that it just sounded good. The harmonies simply worked. He didn't go off a pre-existing rule book. In fact, he was essentially right then and there inventing it, because he did not like the pre-existing rule set that came before him. In that sense, he was actually a bit of a rule breaker. He did not actually follow the rules for most of his musical career. And if you are insistent on killing your actual intuition and your sense of ear as a musician simply for the sake of following rules, then you're never going to achieve a flow state. And certainly if you have any aspirations of pushing the envelope of what's possible in music, you're never going to do that if you are simply stuck to the old rules. But let's talk then about the people who actually don't go off of rules in the first place, and they essentially rely on musical intuition. And again, this is a lot of self-taught musicians, or at least it's the stereotype with a lot of them, that music theory is essentially an afterthought to them. And though it is a musical language, they rely on their ear only, and they don't think in terms of math or anything complex in harmony. And here's the thing, that's not a badge of honor. To be essentially removing yourself from your actual ability to communicate and to have your grid that you know in your head of harmonies and everything that goes into the rules is just a lack of discipline. It's not something that increases your musical purity or makes you better than musicians who essentially learn rules and then apply and work within them and only sparingly break them. It's not a higher sense of accomplishment or anything like that. And that's not to mention the fact that if you ever have aspirations of playing with high-level professionals or anything where you have to coordinate with other people, not having a disposable musical language and something that is common between all of you is going to make it very difficult to rehearse, to effectively and efficiently put together high amounts of music, because you just simply won't have the language to quickly and efficiently dissect what's going on with music. So what you actually need to be doing long-term is integrating the two styles into each other. Because to use the kind of common analogy that I've heard a lot of different YouTubers and music theory people use, music is essentially language, and therefore music theory is grammar. because grammar does not dictate the reality and hard set facts of what's going on with music, but it is functional language. So essentially it's descriptive. It's not actually describing something that is baked into reality and something that cannot be broken the way maybe mathematics or physics is, but at the same time it can't be discarded, because if you go around trying to talk to people without having any shared form of language or interface with which to interact, it's not going to go very well for you. So learning music theory, especially if you want to be a high-level musician, is not optional. That doesn't mean you need to master it or make it your whole purpose and study every day or anything. But only after you've mastered music theory can you then start to step outside of the rules and know how you're specifically breaking stuff. Again, if you want to be the highest level musician that you can. At the same time, you don't need to be mastering and thinking of it as some intellectual game to just know as many chords as you can, or to have the entirety of music history or atonal, pitch class integer notation memorized in your head or anything like that. You really don't need such a high degree of music theory to do most of what functionally the vast majority of pro musicians actually do. But you need tools. And tools are the only way that we can produce something lasting, something that's actually deep in terms of the craft of making music, rather than just simply recycling the same things over and over again, because we really don't know what's going on with the actual mechanics behind music. So reject the thought of the music theory nerd who just sits there writing staff paper and can only think within the confines of 18th century counterpoint, and at the same time reject the idea of the other person who thinks that music theory is just something snobby that only people who want to gatekeep ever think about. Because in reality, if you want artistic freedom, the middle ground is going to be what actually enables that for you. Anyways, that's it for today. I'll see you.